Okay, the first thing I'd like to demo is the new Shared Msmq and Sql. So the way we configure it is you would go into your Enterprise Fax Manager, go to your services, and from the server module, you can double click and you will see your Sql connections. As you can see now, we still have a database, a required database for your RightFax metadata. We have a database for your fax images. This is with the optional Sql Storage module. This was introduced a couple of versions back, allows you to install your fax images in Sql as blobs. So actually they store them in Sql as blobs and you don't need a separate NAS or SAN or file share to store your images. Here is your RightFax archive. I also spoke about in the demo. So here's where you would enable the database to store your RightFax faxes and metadata that are in the archive database. And lastly, your MSMQ database. So if you're running RightFax in a shared services environment or collective, you would actually click here and you would create a second or maybe third database just for your queues. So you'll have your primary database for your RightFax, your optional database for your images, and now this would be a third one for your queues. Okay, the next thing I'll demo, which it's not really a demo because for time's sake, I don't really have time to send the full fax, but I will show you where you now can go into your server module and enable high resolution fax. So it's just a checkbox in server module. As I mentioned earlier, enabling high resolution fax will definitely increase the quality of faxes sent to a fax server or fax machine that can support high resolution, but it'll definitely slow down the transmission. Okay, let's move on to some of the fax utility enhancements I mentioned earlier. So what I'll do is I'll minimize the Enterprise Fax Manager and I'll bring up the fax utility. So the first thing, let's go through the user avatar and visual history. So if you go to a fax and you either right click and show history or click on the history button, let's do a show history, you'll see it looks very different. So now what it has is your visual and your avatar. I don't have my picture imported, so it just puts my initials of my user account. But as you can see, a fax came in and you could follow the flow. Came in that is blank because it's a transmission record. No one owned it at that point. Once I owned it, it now has my record, a forward record. So it forwarded from the Jeff, the JEFF account to Netter. A system process now was an OCR, created an OCR. And then it's telling us that it moved it to a RightFax gateway. So those are your improved visual history and avatar. Also, what I like is the new search. So previous versions of RightFax, you could do some basic searches. You could sort by date and time. By clicking here, you can sort by any of these fields. Now with the advanced search button and the search button here, you have the ability not only to search on metadata. So if I go into advanced search, we can do some advanced searches on individual metadata fields. So now RightFax can be enabled to OCR every fax that comes in and create an index file with the data. So I'll try to do this here on the demo. Let's look at an inbound fax and see if this works. I think it will. Let's go to the next page. And let's do a search for the word document. Looks like it works. So now every one of these faxes has the word document in the content, not just the metadata. And actually, in this case, it's not the metadata, it is the content. And that's brand new with 16.4, but I just wanted to show you some of the abilities that you can do some advanced searches. And I'm going to go into one more time. The advanced search is more for metadata searches and just a little bit more granular on what you can filter on your searches. Also, I didn't talk about it earlier, but I wanted to show you that on your view now, you have additional fields you can view. So now if you want to look at the ANI, also known as like the caller ID or the DID number, you have the ability to put all these fields here. So as you can see, the fax utility is becoming more and more like a mini workflow engine. All right, now we'll look at some of the improvements in the archive module. So let's minimize and let's go first to the group. So I'll show you where you can exclude your group from archive. So if we go to aging and archiving, this is brand new, exclude from RightFax archive. So when this is checked, anyone in this group will not have their faxes archived. And if I go back to where I was before, which was under the server module, and go to my Sql connections, under the RightFax archive Sql connection, we can now purge faxes that have been archived for more than any day you choose. So now you have layers of archive. So you have your first level, which is under the group, which will move faxes or delete them based on if you have the archive module. So if you don't have the archive module, faxes will be deleted. Let me just show you so you know what I'm talking about. So when we go here, faxes will be deleted based on the number here and how many days they are. If you own the archive module and it is enabled, faxes will first be moved to the archive database based on the number here, and then removed from the archive database based on the number under here. So in this case, after 1 year, they'll actually be purged from the archive. Okay, let's look at the archive folder. So as you can see in the fax utility here, there is a new folder called archive, and any faxes over a certain amount of time will be moved to this archive folder. There they are. And as you could see, my archive is set for basically 2 days. It's pretty quick. But we archived everything automatically, and I can view it, and all the tools I have from my main or all folders or any of my folders are available in the archive folder. The difference is the archive folder is using a different database. Okay, so let's take a look at the custom stamps. You know what? We've been doing a lot on the thick client. Let's take a look at the web client while we're at it. So we'll go to the 16.6 RightFax web client. I'm gonna log on. And once I'm in, you will see I have the ability to look at a fax. And I'm gonna look at a 3-page fax that came in, and I will add my stamp. So there it is. Pretty nice. And I'll pick my Jane Doe. Hit OK. Place it. There it is. Really easy to use, and it's as I mentioned, this is on a user basis. People can have their own stamp libraries. Okay, let's take a look at a very basic workflow. The workflows can be a little complex, so I'm just going to show a real easy how we configure it and how it can be used. So first thing we'll look at is the Enterprise Fax Manager, and we'll see I have a workflow set up here already called Jeff Test. So let's take a look at it. So pretty straightforward. You give it an ID, a description. You decide who is responsible. Basically, so when this workflow comes in, who can go in and work on these faxes? And next you define your metadata, and you can add a lot. It could be well over 100 different metadata pieces and decide if it's required or not. And then you have to define a completion action. So after you do the requirements of a fax when it comes in and you add the metadata as needed manually, what should happen next? So in this case, it's going to go to another workflow called Jeff Test Follow-up. We have to create a user with the workflow as a route type. So let's go to this user, so workflow 2, and I go to routing, and you'll see that we defined this fax number, this route code, for its route to be workflow, and it's going to deliver it to the Jeff Test workflow. So earlier, I actually sent a fax to the Jeff Test, and if you notice, if I go into Jeff Test, there are faxes here. Now I can look at them. So let's look at the one I just sent earlier, and I can, you see that's new. Now I have a doctor's name. So this is where I'd manually go through the fax and put Dr. Smith and this prescription number, let's say the prescription of the medicine he prescribed. Okay, once I do that, those are the required fields. I say save. And now it is saving the metadata in there, and it's done. So if I click out, the required metadata fields are filled out, and that is done, and it would move on to the next workflow or be considered complete at that point. So that's a very basic workflow. You can add, as I mentioned, as many pieces of metadata as you want, and you can have it move on to multiple workflows over and over again, or you can just move it to a final fax mailbox when you're done. Next, we have automated library documents, and that is done on the group level. So if I go into any group, we'll start with everyone. Pretty straightforward and easy to configure. You would go into your access control, and you would check this box. And when you check this, you're selecting for the group the one library document that you automatically want to attach right after the cover sheet. So I can select it, and now this would be used. Any fax that goes out for anyone in this group would automatically have the sample library doc attached. And the last thing I'd like to show you real quick is how easy it is to enable the auto OCR and outbound. So what you would do is go to default outbound settings on a user and enable this. In the back end, you will have a text file that would have all the prohibited words. And if anything in the OCR matched a word in the prohibited.txt file, RightFax would block it and can send a notification to the user or to a group admin or like a compliance officer that a fax has been blocked, and they can then look at it.